Next, from the state capitol, we hear more about the issue of having the developmentally disabled move to group homes in communities and out of institutionalized care, as we talk with Tony Pulowski, Executive Director of the ARC of Illinois, and other supporters of community care. This runs about 20 minutes.
Tony Pulowski with the ARC of Illinois. Thanks for joining us again. And you had a rally today with members of the developmentally disabled community. In the broad context, why rally here at the Capitol? What message are you trying to send?
Well, Terry, first of all, thanks for having me again. This is the day of the governor's budget address, and what better time for people with disabilities to be in the Capitol and raising their voices about the importance of community inclusion and having a full life in the community. So we thought this was just the perfect time for us to be here to send a message not only to the governor, who's a big supporter of closing state institutions and investing in the community, but also to legislators who have been a little more hesitant to take a leadership role in that regard.
As I recall the issue, the developmentally disabled, it's argued, do better in group homes, and the cost is about half, roughly maybe 60% of what it was to put them in institutions. Is that still the case from a cost standpoint? And if it is, given the state's financial difficulties, what opposition do you hear from lawmakers?
Well, it's a dilemma, because you're exactly right. It costs about $248,000 to have a person warehoused at the Murray Center in Centralia. And in the community, you can provide better supports and better outcomes for people at around $75,000 or $80,000 a year. So there's almost 3 for 1. What the governor is doing is moving people off the waiting list with those additional resources, which is really important. Why legislators aren't jumping on board, I don't know. I think they fear the Public Employees Union. I think that they don't want to go up against some of their legislative friends in the southern Illinois area, but I think those are the wrong reasons, because investing in the community, benefits everybody, especially people with intellectual and developmental disabilities.
Now, where do we actually stand as far as having people put into group homes? Is it ongoing? I mean, is a law that has to be passed? Is it merely a question, I shouldn't say merely, but is it a question of funding? What are the hurdles?
It's more a question of funding, and that's why closing the state institutions are so important, because we're using those resources and we're eliminating the most obsolete, wasteful portion of the disability system, and then you reinvest that into community living, and people have a choice about where they want to live, who they want to live with, and what they want to do during the day. I mean, it's a win-win situation for those people. Down the road here, just last year, we closed the Jacksonville Developmental Center. That closure was followed by the University of Illinois in Chicago. They just released their findings last week. They found that people are living happily their lives. Some are working, they are making new friends, and the parents who opposed the closure initially have done a flip-flop, and 84% of those families say that they like the community more than they did the state institution.
I tell people, one of the things in covering this story in years past that really I found remarkable, because like most people, I just really haven't had a whole lot of contact with the developmentally disabled or know what to expect. There was a discussion, a policy discussion, and you had members of the developmentally disabled getting up and asking policy questions of I forgot who the speaker was, and I thought, wow, if they can follow public policy debate, they're doing better than the man on the street.
Absolutely, and public policy is life or death for people with disabilities. If you're not involved, you can have some serious consequences. And we find over the years, the more that we empower people, the more that they can do. And you're seeing the results of community living, special education. Our investments are really paying off for people now that many years ago were written off as being helpless individuals who couldn't learn, and we know that people can thrive in the community. Everybody can thrive in the community.
And let me close with that. When we say developmentally disabled, tell us a little bit about, I mean, I'm sure there's going to be a range. Tell us what makes someone developmentally disabled, one, and two, to what extent has the whole school of thought about, just as I was surprised about their capacity and capability, to what extent has the whole school of thought about the developmentally disabled changed as they have gone into these group homes and, as we've heard from other people, blossomed in that context?
Well, what's changed is, well, first of all, a developmental disability and an intellectual disability is something that is lifelong. You're born with that condition, and it's spread across the general public. You know, you can be poor and have a developmental disability, and you can be rich and have a developmental disability. It knows no class. What we've learned, Terry, is that our investments in early intervention, early childhood education, and special education are paying off. And what families have been telling us forever, and now people with intellectual disabilities themselves, is have great expectations. And when you expect more, and you provide opportunity, and you provide choices, people grow and they thrive. And Illinois is a great example of that. And today is probably one of the higher points in my life when I see people speaking up and speaking out for themselves.
All right, well, Tony Pulowski, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, Terry.
Catherine Hammond, thanks for joining us. So you just spoke at a rally for the developmentally disabled, and you told a story that I would ask you to repeat about your sister. Tell us, I presume your sister is developmentally disabled, and she was housed in a institution for a long time. Tell us her story.
My sister is 71 years old. When she was 2 years old, she was found to be profoundly developmentally disabled, and at that time they used very unacceptable terms for that. She was diagnosed as being an idiot, an imbecile, and things like that, which were actually clinical definitions, which is horrifying to me. But so when she was 2 years old, she was declared a ward of the state because that was the only way that she would be accepted into a state institution, which my parents were advised was the best place for her. So she was actually, because she was a ward of the court, an officer of the court and someone from the sheriff's department came and picked her up at home as though she were under arrest and drove her to Dixon, to her new home, and she was 2 years old. She lived there until she was 37 or 8, I think. I was in my 20s when we met each other. I'm 10 years younger, and we did not know each other growing up. She was completely isolated from our family. It was a very, very tough place to live. It was overcrowded and understaffed. At one point, there were 140-some children living in her so-called cottage. Illness there ran rampant. She spent probably the first 2 years of her life in the infirmary there. And so she was ill a great deal of the time. There were a lot of different things, common childhood illnesses, and a lot of things that are less common, like dysentery and hepatitis, which she had over and over.
So today the rally was that people should be living in group homes and not in institutions, and she was institutionalized for all those years. More recently, how long now has she been in a group home, and how has it changed her life?
She's going into her 7th year. It's completely different for her. She has her own room. She has privacy, which she's never had in her life. She has choice. She lives in a small home with 5 other ladies. If she wants to hang out with everyone else in the common areas of the house, she'll do that. If she feels like being alone, she'll sit in her room. She likes to listen to the radio. She has little stuffed animals that she likes to carry around. I mean, she is a calmer, happier person, and basically she gets so much more individualized care.
When did you realize as a family that her care in an institution really wasn't what it should be?
Unfortunately, our parents were discouraged from ever visiting. And finally, in the 60s and 70s, they started going to an annual meeting down there at Dixon and getting some idea of what was actually going on and what her care was like. So I felt, when Dixon closed and I helped her move to Howe, I felt that was a big improvement. And I still wasn't thinking in terms of institution versus the community, but Howe seemed more forward, thinking she was in a smaller home there and stuff. So I volunteered at Howe, and I ended up working there. I was a state employee for 11 years. And it was really seeing it as an employee and seeing the things that families don't necessarily see, and being there, that I really realized this wasn't the right place for her. That even though it might have been better than Dixon, she's probably autistic. They didn't know much about autism at the time. But she does, I'm trying to think how to put this. She just did not get the kind of individual attention. I would go over and everybody else would have gone on some sort of little outing or trip or something, and she wouldn't go along because they said, she might wander away or something. I didn't feel that things were planned for her or around her as a person.
You had mentioned at the rally that you discovered that your sister liked things you didn't know she liked to do. What were some of those things that she enjoys doing?
She enjoys going to the pet shop, and she enjoys watching birds. I had no idea that she liked anything like that. She enjoys music way more than I realized. She enjoys shopping. She enjoys going out to eat. And I felt nervous about doing some of those things with her because she seemed like she's kind of impatient. She doesn't like to wait. But she's really calmed down quite a bit, and the key is doing things more one-on-one and things that she likes to do.
And relative to lawmakers having an understanding about this issue, what would you tell them?
I think the lawmakers are hearing a great deal from people, and I think even today people might have had the impression that people who have a lot of abilities, everyone agrees that people who have a lot of abilities should be in the community. But people like my sister, who have a lot more challenges and need a lot more care, she can still also be in the community. She can still get 24-hour care. She can still get the supports that she needs, but she benefits so much more. So I think they need to know that people with very severe and profound disabilities can do well in the community too.
All right, well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Rita Winkler, you're the president of the Murray Parents Association with the Murray Center in Centralia, Illinois. We had a rally here at the Capitol relative to the developmentally disabled. They were asking, the rally was in favor of group homes. What are your thoughts on that subject?
Okay, I'm in a very unique position. I have a brother who's disabled that lives in a group home, and that is the right, least restrictive environment for him. We also have a son who lives at Murray Center who is severely disabled, 30 years old, functions like a 9-month-old, needs to be changed, fed, diapered. What the Murray Parents has always advocated is a wide spectrum of services, from living at home with parents to the state centers. And the huge difference between the two, for one thing, is staffing, training. Also at the state centers are held to a much higher standard. They are inspected 5 times a year by different agencies, whereas community homes are at best inspected every 3 years. If they are privately owned, they don't even have to go in and look at the house. And we have had many people who live at Murray now have tried community placement in recent years. Some have ended up in jail, some have ended up tasered. We have people who range from very, very low functioning people who have an IQ of 4 or 5 who need total round-the-clock nursing care, to people who are higher functioning but have severe behavior issues that many group homes and community placement, they have not accepted them. They've attempted to live in the community. It has failed several times. And the quality of care at Murray is a huge concern because it is so much better than what we have seen in the community for the residents we have that live at Murray.
There was, I'm told, a report came out by the University of Chicago that said group homes, that the people are functioning better, and the cost is about a half or a third of what it costs to have someone in an institution. Now, what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, that survey that came from there, actually, when we had our federal lawsuit, that survey was actually found to not be scientifically valid. The recent survey they had from Jacksonville, they had maybe talked to 8 people, and they only talked to 65% of the people. And the cost, absolutely, it will probably be less because you receive less services. At Murray, you are going to have a doctor, a nurse, you're going to have physical therapy. I know from my brother living in the community, those services, you have to go out to seek them. Seeking dental care in the community is almost non-existent. It took us about a year to find a dentist that would deal with my brother and accept public aid, and even after we offered to pay for it, the services were not there. It is going to be cheaper in the community because you don't get the same kind of services.
Why would the services not be there?
Because at Murray, we have round-the-clock nurses that are actually there.
No, but I mean, can't they in group home just take someone out to a dentist?
They could if you could find a dentist that would take them. The vast majority of them are on public aid. There are extremely few dentists that, especially in the rural area we live, now it may be different in Chicago. In our rural area, as I said, it took me over 9 months to find any dentist just to see my brother. And I did ask Mark Doyle about that, who's with the governor's office. I said, you know, what are we going to do about dental care for our people if they move? And he said, yeah, that is a problem. He said, nobody wants to see him. I mean, the services just are not there. Or like at Murray, you can have physical therapy every day if you need it, or you can have therapy so you can swallow, which some of our people have issues with that because they can't swallow, where in the community you are limited to like 90 hours a year. It's just a whole different setup compared to the community. Because
when you say, I'm sorry, when you limited to 90 hours a year for what?
For like say physical therapy or speech therapy, it just depends on the type of therapy, but there's definitely a limit.
Are you saying the group homes really aren't good? I mean, we hear so many different people. I mean, the people here who are rallying saying
Absolutely
they want to
not.
be in group homes.
Absolutely
Some want to actually
not.
just live in their own apartment.
Absolutely. And that is what the Murray parents are really fighting for. We know, as I said, my brother lives in a group home. I'm not saying the group homes. We have never said they are bad. But what we do want is that we know there are some people who you cannot live in a group home. They're not going to put 2 people in a home and hire round-the-clock RN nurses to be with them 24 hours a day, and that is what they actually do need.
Does the nub come down to how severe developmentally disabled? So, I mean, if you have somebody that was very severe, then you would have them perhaps in a center like Murray?
Yes, absolutely. Most of the people who lived at Murray, the people who live in the community have already been moved from Murray and live in the community. Absolutely, there are wonderful group homes, and they're wonderful state centers. They're not all the same, but our concern is that the standards are not there for the community homes, and we feel if they're going to move this many people into the community, they have to have the same high standards that they do for the state centers.
All right, well, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you very much.
You're watching the Illinois Channel.